All right, hey Dave, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. So we decided to bring back this podcast.
We did. It's been a long time coming, but we felt it was necessary with all of the downtime currently. And let's get to it.
Yeah, something pretty appropriate about today is actually it is storming.
It really is. It's quite the line of storms headed our way for probably the next couple of hours. So we'll have that to enjoy.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of appropriate. We have a good ambiance for this particular topic we're going to be talking about today.
We do. It'll be nice and creepy.
That's right. Got to get the ASMR going on this podcast.
That's right.
But today we're going to be talking about dreams.
We are.
And, there's a lot of people that actually think that dreams are somehow supernaturally relevant, that people can receive actual messages from deceased loved ones, or actually get messages from the afterlife or other dimensions through particular dream states while they're sleeping.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good theory. I probably would subscribe to that, I would say.
Have you ever had any experiences where you think you actually were dreaming and had something happen that in the dream that you might attribute to being a little bit peculiar, paranormal?
I don't know if I would say paranormal. I've definitely had some weird different dream states that I've gone through, which we could talk about a little bit later on, as we actually unwrap this episode here. But yes, have you?
I've had a couple, and I think as we go through, because I actually have done a little bit of research on this, and I've kind of laid out different forms of dreaming that people believe to be supernaturally relevant or attributed to the afterlife, or you have like astral projection, precognitive dreaming, shared dreams, and then of course you have your lucid dreaming and people having visions, and so it's all pretty interesting.
A lot of variety there in the dream world.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most interesting, I think, that I've been kind of looking into is what people call remote viewing or visitation dreams.
Okay.
And what that is people believe that they're visited by deceased loved ones or people that they knew that have died, who come to them in a dream and tell them something or give them some sort of message. Now, this is not, while you're awake, because there's a lot of other, we could get into a whole other topic of people seeing deceased loved ones while they are in a near-death state themselves, and maybe we'll do a podcast about that at a later date. But this is specifically talking about whenever they are asleep, they dream, someone comes to them in their dream and gives them some sort of a message. And history's littered with people who have believed to have received messages from the beyond while they were dreaming.
So sort of just like a premonition in a sense.
Yeah. And if you think about it, and not necessarily premonitions, because that's gets into precognitive dreaming, which is a little bit different, and we can get into that too. But I remember Jason had an interesting experience before our cursed cabin investigation that could be considered a visitation dream. Of course, we were living in Wheeling at the time, and he was sleeping on the couch that night,
mm-hmm.
and he said that he woke up, or thought he woke up, and he looked over at the stairs, which here turns out he was still asleep, but he looked over and he saw a shadow, but it was like this really deep, raspy breathing, and he watched this shadow walk across the room. And then what was interesting was that was an experience that was similar that you and Polly, your mom, had at that cursed cabin at an earlier date with that gentleman talking to himself.
Right. Yeah, I remember before we went down there, he had told us about that, and it was kind of chilling because at one point he said that he thought it was me walking across the room, headed to the upstairs bedroom, and he had kind of, reached out to me and made some kind of a noise, and I didn't respond. And he brought it up to me the next day, and I had no idea what he was talking about. And then he kind of spiraled a little bit because he didn't know what had really happened.
Yeah. Maybe, people who don't subscribe to any sort of supernatural or paranormal phenomenon may write that off as saying that it was some sort of pareidolia. He described the experience in the dream, and it sounded similar to one that you had in a past investigation. So, it made it seem as though it was connected. But really, I mean, that's hard to explain if you think about it.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I don't think he ever knew about the experience that Mom and I had before we even went on this trip. It was kind of just like, and if I'm remembering it right, when it was, I believe the second time that we went there, we had been waiting outside because there was a gentleman who was staying at the cabin, and he said he needed a little bit of time to get some things together, and he was going to head to a hotel or something like that. And while we were waiting on him, we heard him arguing and like yelling and talking with something, and we could also hear something speaking back with him. And we didn't really think anything of it. We just thought maybe that he had a drinking buddy or somebody like that in there, and they had gotten into some sort of quarrel over something, and that they would be done and be out of there shortly. Well, we get in there and we realize that he left and there's nobody that left with him. We get in there and there was no TV, no radio. You can't get cell phone signal up there, so he couldn't have been talking to anybody on the phone. And yeah, it was a weird experience.
Yeah, I bet. And Jason had never heard that story before to have that dream, which was even more strange. You know, a lot of people could say, well, power of persuasion, the power of persuasion caused him to have that dream because you had told him about that experience in the past, but you didn't tell him about that.
He did not know about it
So
beforehand.
that's kind of weird. And that's a location that's riddled with a lot of creepy and dark energy too.
Oh yeah. Yeah, lots of weird things going on there.
But if you think also about, astral projection and lucid dreaming or out-of-body experiences, a lot of people contribute that together. Of course, lucid dreaming just basically means a dream in which you can control the state of your dream. You are in control. Got some good thunder there.
That was a good one.
The dream, you are in control of the dream. You can actually see and control yourself and what you're doing, almost as though you're living life right now.
I do that. That's generally the types of dreams that I have nightly.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting because not everybody lucid dreams. It's not rare, but also it's not something that everybody does.
Right.
And some people have taken that to the extreme. They've trained their brain to be able to control what they dream about and when they dream about it, so they can actually say, I want to be on a beach somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to go on vacation. That's what happens in their dream, and that's a really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy when you're in the midst of dreaming, you realize that you are dreaming, and then you kind of, like you said, you kind of get to change the course of what's happening. And to me, I've always enjoyed that. And I know I've talked to some people that they've had that happen and they do not like it whatsoever. It kind of freaks them out. But I really enjoy it, so maybe that makes me the freak. I
don't know. Maybe. Man, that lightning is going crazy.
Hopefully we don't lose electric here.
I hope not. That would mean we would lose all these lights, but fingers crossed we finish this before that happens.
Yeah.
But that kind of borderlines on the astral projection, which people have believed to be able to master the discipline of being able to leave their own body and travel to other places while they sleep. And not in their dream. They're talking about they're able to have their spirit or their essence leave their body.
Right.
And they can control where it goes. People usually will see what they call the silver string theory, which is they see this silver string and they can pull themselves out of their own body. Or some people wake up and they're looking down at themselves sleeping in their bed, and then from there they can go and fly. People have talked about flying through the air at great speeds, looking down on civilization as they fly over top.
Now, see, that I would think that would be really interesting to do, but I would find that to be a little bit creepy.
Yeah.
I've watched a couple other YouTubers throughout, the last couple of years, and they have claimed that they do that. And, I just think that would be Very interesting to
Yeah,
try.
and a lot of movies have actually played on that, like the very popular movie Insidious. That was the basis of that, this young boy got lost in this spirit realm while he was astral projecting.
Mm-hmm.
And then he could not find his way back, so he was in a coma-like state because his essence or his spirit could not find its way back to his body. So you kind of get into some horror stories with that, and I think Hollywood has kind of played on that nightmare a little bit too. So
Yeah, because I mean, if you subscribe to the demons and things like that, and if you're in that parallel where things are just kind of, there's really no restrictions on it. You never know what could play mind games with you or anything like that.
yeah, like you said, that's a part of the dream world that I don't know how I would feel about experimenting with. But there's other types of dreaming that can get a little bit creepier than even that. They talk about precognitive dreams. Precognitive dreams, of course, is like people say they have these dreams that could predict the future. Like they have a dream about something and then it actually happens in reality. Probably the most well-known example of precognitive dreams is from Abraham Lincoln's prediction. He had a dream about his assassination just days before it happened.
Really?
Yeah. It came actually from the recollection of one of his bodyguards who used to be a law partner with him. The guy's name was Ward Hill Layman. And there's actually a story that he told that Abraham Lincoln, while he was president, just days before his assassination, told both him, a few other bodyguards, and his wife, Mary Todd Lincoln, about a dream that he had where he was in the White House and he heard this audible sobbing. And he followed the audible sobbing downstairs and went over to the East Wing, and he actually walked in on a wake, saw the body laying out, walked up to one of the mourners and asked them this is Abraham Lincoln's dream. He asked one of the mourners, what happened? Who is this? And the mourner said, that's the president. He was killed by an assassin. And a few days after Abraham Lincoln told them about this dream, that actually came to pass when he was actually killed and assassinated by John Wilkes Booth.
That is pretty creepy.
Yeah, very strange. So, I mean, there's a lot of people that put a lot of weight to these precognitive dreams, and it sounds like something that you would pull out of, just fantasy.
Right.
You want to say that they're just not necessarily crazy, but they're just making it up. It's their imagination. But when something as definitive as that happens, now some people could say that, he was speculating on his own assassination because he knew how much the southern part of the nation disliked him. He knew how many people out there wanted him dead because he made them change their way of life.
Right.
So some people might say, he knew there was a lot of people that wanted him dead, so why wouldn't he dream about being assassinated? And it's just a coincidence that a few days after, less than 2 weeks after he had this dream, he was actually assassinated. That's just a coincidence. But it's definitely strange.
It is strange. And I've heard on more than one occasion that Lincoln was kind of into like the spiritual side of things.
Yeah. Especially his wife.
Mm-hmm.
His wife, they say that she actually performs seances. So
it's hard to tell. Maybe she had some sort of vision and let him see it in his dream, or however it works. Who knows?
Yeah. But of course, then you also have, like lucid dreaming, where people can control the dreams, the experience that they have in the dream. And, I mean, have you ever had an example like that you said that that's what you do most of the time. You have lucid dreams most of the time. So what kind of happens in those dreams?
Yeah, lucid dreams are something that, it is something that happens to me more frequently than not. I would say 90% of the time that I dream, it would be a lucid dream. So I don't know if that is unusual or peculiar or something like that. But to me, I enjoy it. I know a lot of people probably find it weird, but I enjoy it. But something I do want to run by you, and I know you have a list of all the different dream states and things like that.
Yeah.
Because somebody did their homework and I didn't. But over the course of the last probably 2 to 3 years, I have had this series of dreams where it starts off with me lying in my bed, and I can see myself lying in the bed from the doorway of the bedroom, and then I kind of snap back into my own vision, and as I'm laying there, kind of almost paralyzed or frozen in a sense, people that I know, and one particular occasion, just a boss from a job that I had would come into my room and just kind of stand there and stare at me. But it was very, very, very realistic. And to the point of where when I would snap out of the dream and wake up, I would expect that person to be standing there. And then another example of the type of dreaming that I have is I will focus well, not necessarily on purpose focus on an object, but like before I go to bed or something, like if I have a glass of water or something and I'll set it on the nightstand, that object will come into my dream and I'll see the object in my dream. And then also, again, people that I know will come into my bedroom, living people that I know, not passed on or anything like that. But they will come into my room and they will focus and study on the object and be really inquisitive of said object, and then I will snap out of it and I'll immediately look at the object and then look around the room looking for the person that was just inspecting the object. So what do you make of that, Professor?
I mean, I don't really know that much about this, just from the very brief studies that I've done over the past day or so. But I mean, it's very interesting. It sounds like you're almost doing the opposite. People talk about astral projecting out of body experiences. It sounds like you're taking that object and placing it into the subconscious of these characters in your dream, so to speak. I don't know if it has any supernatural or paranormal element to it, but it's definitely really strange. I guess it just shows you have a very strong discipline over lucid dreaming.
Could be. I don't know. It's very odd. I don't dislike it, but in the same fact, when I wake up from it, it has me a little bit frantic, but not in a bad way.
Yeah. Now, I lucid dream sometimes, not a lot. It doesn't. It happens to me maybe a couple times a year, to where I'll actually. Which the last lucid dream I had, I told you about in depth. It was very strange, and I think more symbolic of my subconscious than anything else. But there was one lucid dream that I had 7 or so years ago, 6 or 7 years ago, that really to this day still gives me chills because of its connection to an investigation that we had back. It was the private residence when we investigated Angie's house, if you remember that.
I do.
Yeah, and so of course, in this case, she had she believed there was a dark energy that was haunting her family, oppressing her family, and that her kids were being affected by it, that her kids were seeing this man in a dark cloak or this dark robe, and they called him the Mean Man, and he would say things to them or tell them to do things to themselves, like harm themselves or harm their family. Well, she had a dream which she told Steve about, and I heard her talk about it because I was filming. I was running the camera at the time. She talked about how she had been going down into this mausoleum or crypt, and it was very old because the walls leading up to it, the hallway that led to the chamber of the mausoleum, were made out of hand-cut stone. And as she was walking down this hallway, she came into this burial chamber, and it was dark, and she couldn't see into the darkness, and this voice called out to her and told her to harm her children. Now, in her mind, with her, beliefs, her religious beliefs, her faith, she believed it to be Satan, believed it to be the devil, and she was genuinely concerned that this figure, this evil man, was Satan trying to get her to kill her kids.
Right.
And so it really bothered her. And it actually made her start crying when she was talking about the dream.
I remember that, yeah.
Well, we investigated, and then after the investigation, we went home. I went back up to college. I was going to school in Pittsburgh at the time, and I went back to my dorm about 3 or 4 nights after that. And at that point, I had a roommate that was never there. I was alone. He was always out with friends or staying with friends or going to social functions, so I was usually by myself there in that dorm room. And so I was again that night sleeping by myself, and I started to have a dream. And this was a lucid dream because I was moving freely. I could walk, I could change direction, I knew what was happening. I walked down the stairs into this mausoleum or crypt with the stone walls, hand-cut stone walls. And as I walked down that hallway, I had this realization. It clicked in my head. This is what Angie was dreaming about. And I didn't want to have a dream like that. I didn't want to experience that. So I turned around and I walked back, and I started to almost jog down that hallway, back up the stairs. And as soon as I exited, I woke up, almost as though me exiting that dream propelled me out of my dream state, or shocked me awake. And when I woke up, I was facing the window, and standing in front of the window was a shadow figure, the outline of a man, head, shoulders, standing in front of that window. And it scared me so badly I jumped up and screamed audibly, and I immediately shut my eyes. And when I opened my eyes, the figure was gone. There was nobody there.
Now let me ask you this: when you woke up, or when you jolted awake rather, the shadow guy that was standing there, was he staring at you or turned around the other way staring out the window?
I couldn't tell. It was a silhouette. Yeah.
Now let me ask you this: do you think that during the dream that you were having, it being a lucid dream,
right,
do you think that whatever the shadow was standing, maybe not above you, but near you, and was controlling your dream from the outside in, and then when you had the clarity to turn around and come out, and you woke up really quick, that you saw it before it could disappear from controlling your dream?
That was, for the longest time, yeah, I had a very strong belief that whoever was in my bedroom when I woke up, that they were controlling and making me dream. I believe that something followed me from Angie's house.
Okay.
And that it was that entity that I saw in front of the window, and they were the ones that were controlling my dream and making me have the same dream as her. And that when I refused to go and finish the dream and came back out, when I refused to finish the dream, it kind of caught them off guard, so they couldn't disappear before I had woken up. But, that was what I believed back then. Now, after doing a lot of research about dreams and dream states and wakefulness and restfulness and sleep and the REM cycle, it's kind of interesting because there's ways that scientists have tried to explain the exact phenomena that I just described. They, of course, attribute it to what they call, of course, hallucinations, which we'll get into hallucinations after this description, because I have some different feelings about hallucinations and the word and what it actually describes. But you have what they called hypnagogic hallucinations, which is when you're trying to fall asleep, part of your brain is asleep, while the other part of your brain is still awake. So in that half asleep, half awake state, your brain can begin to dream, and therefore these dreams actually become hallucinations to your eyes and in the space that you are in. A lot of people think of it when they get really, really tired, and attribute, strange feelings. Some very common one that people experience all the time. Have you ever been laying in bed and all of a sudden, as you're falling asleep, it feels like you're falling?
I have never.
You've never experienced that. That's a common one that a lot of people experience, and I've experienced it before too, where it'll feel like I'm falling, like I'm free falling, and then all of a sudden it startles me, and I wake up a little bit more, and then I'm just laying in bed. They consider that to be a hallucination, but some people will actually see things in that state. There's also what they call hypnopompic hallucinations, which is the opposite. You're not going to sleep, you are coming out of sleep, you're waking up, which is exactly what I described. Think of it kind of like a bleed over from the dream. You have this very scary dream, and you can wake up, and that dream will continue as you are awake for just about, sometimes up to 10 seconds after the dream has concluded and you've woken up. There was a man in Australia, he was in his 80s, and he talked about his first hypnopompic hallucination that he had was when he was 8 years old, and he had them 4 times a night throughout his entire life, where he would wake up and he would see things in his bedroom with him that had bled over from his dream. Now, a lot of people think of that, and the reason that happens is because of that state of half asleep, half awake almost creates the same effect in your brain as like LSD would affect. Now, what's kind of interesting about that, have you ever heard anybody talk about, because I've never taken hallucinogenics in any form. Have you ever heard anybody talk about having a spiritual awakening through hallucinogenics, and they believe their hallucinations and the things they experienced weren't just their brain's creations? They believe they experienced a higher sense of enlightenment, or they experienced something supernatural through those hallucinogenic drugs.
I can't say that I have.
You've never heard anybody say that? I mean, if you look up interviews with people on the internet who have done it, there's a lot of people that say that's the only way to achieve a higher sense of enlightenment is you have to take these hallucinogenic drugs or hallucinate in that way.
Well, now I know what we're doing after the podcast.
That's right. But it's interesting because what is a hallucination? You know, that's part, and what is a dream? That's where a lot of science and medicine has actually failed in figuring out. Why do we dream about what we dream about? What can anything influence our dreams? Why does the mind create these hallucinations, and what causes it to hallucinate about what it hallucinates about? You know, that's that gray middle ground. You know, you can call something a hallucination, but it's just like a Band-Aid saying, I don't understand why I'm seeing this. I think my brain is creating it. Hallucination.
Mm-hmm.
So, but why did your brain create that? Because life is nothing but perception.
Yeah.
And hallucinations could be considered chaotic perceptions of our own brain.
Right.
Our brain is perceiving something that we can't explain. It's chaotic. We're frightened by it. But why?
Yeah. I don't know. The only time I've ever heard of something causing a hallucination is like a high fever, like a really high fever. But if you're just like perfectly healthy and you're hallucinating and you're not on any type of drugs or anything like that, then I wonder what would cause it.
Right. And that's what they say. It's like that sudden change from being in my REM cycle of sleep to being awake is what caused that hallucination. That's what they say. But who knows? I mean, what do you guys think? Do you subscribe to that idea that maybe it's something that can be explained through psychology, that maybe it was my brain that made me see that standing in front of the window, and that it was all just my own brain influencing my thoughts, my subconscious thinking about what Angie had told me, so therefore I had that dream, and when I lucid dreamed about that, I caused myself to wake up very suddenly from a REM sleep cycle, causing this hallucination, this hypnopompic hallucination to occur.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I mean, that's interesting. What do you guys think?
Yeah. Put down in the comment section what you think that actually could be. Do you subscribe to more of the supernatural explanation to it, or you subscribe to more of the psychological explanation to it? It's hard to say. Steve and I both actually had a shared dream that was very difficult to explain at the time, and this is taking it even further back, way back. I'd say probably like 9 years ago, we had this dream. But we both had the same dream, and it was in the basement of the West Virginia Penitentiary. When we were dreaming, we were both in the same part of the basement, the same hallway. We walked in the same direction down the hallway. In the middle of the hallway stood this little blonde girl in an old-time dress. And she was not facing towards us. She was facing away from us. And as we walked up to her, in both of our dreams, this is not the same dream. He wasn't in my dream, I wasn't in his dream. It was just us. But what I'm describing is the exact same dream that we both had.
Right.
As we walked up to her, she turned around, and when she turned around, you could just see the top of her head. You think of a child. If you get close enough to them and they turn around, you're looking down on them, all you can see is the top of their head. But when she looked up at us, and she smiled, she had these sharp, jagged teeth, like something out of a nightmare, out of something, like an old Japanese cartoon, horror cartoon.
Right. Yeah.
And that's the only way that I can describe it is it was a frightening sight. But both Steve and I had that dream, and we did not tell each other about it until after we had both had that dream.
Oh, wow.
I don't remember whether it happened on the same night or not, but I do know it happened around the same time. And because I remember him saying, man, I had the creepiest dream. And then when he started telling me about it, I said, wait a minute, I had that dream too. I had that exact dream. So it's kind of hard to explain that away.
And that was after an investigation, right?
Mm-hmm. That was after an investigation at the prison.
Okay, so then maybe I'm thinking of, because Then you guys had something else similar like that happen after we investigated the Sanford Center, didn't you?
That was actually just being influenced by something.
Okay.
Yeah, that was just, and I had an attachment shortly after that, and Steve had some creepy experiences as well. So,
For some reason, I was thinking that was a dream.
Yeah, no, that was unrelated to dreams.
I was dreaming that was a dream.
That's right. But it's kind of interesting because there's a huge divide between the psychological, the psychiatry community, psychology, and then of course, people who subscribe more to what could be described as superstition.
Mm-hmm.
Something, putting a more of a spiritual description on things. There's a huge divide. Nobody can actually agree on why they believe we have these dreams among one another. Of course, everybody thinks they have their own ideas about why we dream about certain things. There wasn't really anybody who kind of subscribed to both, who could see from both points of view, until a 17th, 18th century scientist. His name was Emanuel Swedenborg. They called him the clairvoyant scientist. Now, there's a lot of things that he's attributed to modern science, modern medicine, calculus. Also, he actually helped develop the modern solar system that we use today. So he was a very influential scientist, but towards the end of his life, he started to explore more of his own psychic type of gifts, as he called them. And he actually believed that he was a clairvoyant. There's lots of stories of him actually wowing his friends over. He was sitting 300 miles away from his hometown, and there was a fire that was going on there, and he was telling these dinner guests about this fire and that it was getting towards his home, and then he said, well, it stopped just short of my home. Now, back then, we're talking the 1700s. News did not travel fast back then.
No.
So for him to know about that fire in the moment when it was happening, tell them the details of it, and then when they got word of it 3 days later, having every detail that he told them be confirmed by the news, by the newspapers, they were blown away, flabbergasted by it.
I would say so. I mean, the only thing I could think of is if he pre-planned it himself.
Right, but even then, he can't control a fire. Fire is one of the most uncontrollable things, so uncontrollable, in fact, that when people describe something they think is uncontrollable, they say usually uncontrollable as a wildfire.
Right, yeah,
so
for sure.
But it's also interesting that he was actually, and this is, I can't remember the names of this one, so I apologize for that, but he was trying to get in contact with the creator of the Methodist Church, because they had some questions for him, and he had written them a letter and said, hey, I had a feeling you wanted to meet with me. And sure enough, this man who created the Methodist Church did want to meet with him. So it was kind of strange that, Swedenborg reached out to him. But what was even stranger was he actually, when this man wrote Swedenborg a letter back and said, can I meet with you in 6 months? He said, no, because I'll be dead by then. And in the letter wrote to him the exact day of his death.
Oh, wow.
It was like March the 29th of 1772 or something like that. You'll have to fact check me. I don't have that written down. I just have the year written down. But and sure enough, when that day came around, Swedenborg died.
Oh, wow.
And that was the exact day of his death. So, and it wasn't like his death was self-inflicted either.
Right.
So, but anyway, he actually, what I'm getting to is he subscribed a lot to the meaning behind dreams and supernatural influence in dreams, and he actually wrote and chronicled his dreams and published them for peer research and peer study. So, and had different meanings behind them. He kind of almost was Freudian before Sigmund Freud, if that makes sense.
That'd be an interesting read.
So, but I think we've gotten into a lot of interesting topics today. I think we have given people a lot of interesting things to think about.
Something to chew on anyway.
That's right. So, looks like the storm is actually starting to subside out there. I haven't heard any thunder in a little while. So with the storm subsiding, I think it's time for us to finish up this podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's been a good one. A good first comeback podcast.
Yeah. If you guys really did like this podcast and you were interested in what happened in this podcast and what we talked about, please like it, share it, Subscribe to Paranormal Quest. We have feature-length documentary episodes where we investigate the paranormal and research the things that go bump in the night. And we just released a new episode. It is actually an investigation of the Octagon Mansion. It's called The Ghosts of Octagon Mansion. Go check it out and let us know what you think of it as well. So, but until next time, thanks for watching. And this has been the Paranormal Quest Podcast.
We'll see you in your dreams.